So yesterday, the National Baseball Hall of Fame announced their finalists for the Today's Era Committee to get voted in to the Baseball Hall of Fame. This is Today's Game Era. There are 10 finalists, 6 players, 3 managers, and an executive. Let me go through the players first, then the managers, and then the executive. For the players, the nominees are Harold Baines, Albert Bell, Joe Carter, Will Clark, Oral Hershiser, Lee Smith. Those are the players. The managers are Davey Johnson, Charlie Manuel, and Lou Piniella. And for the executives, George Steinbrenner. Now, the voting, if you don't know how the voting goes for the Today's Game Era Committee, is basically like when the baseball writers elect for who goes into the Hall of Fame. Basically, these guys need 75% of the vote to get into the Hall of Fame. And what I really like about the different committees that they have is they are not by the Baseball Writers Association of America. These are by a select group that are members of the Hall of Fame, that are in Cooperstown, that have a history of baseball. It's a very good collective group. So what I want to do is I want to talk about each individual briefly. And then if I had a vote, who would I select to go in? Because obviously not all 10 are going to get in. Last year, Jack Morris and Alan Trammell got in from this committee. So I'm going to go in alphabetical order like I did just a moment ago. I'm going to start with Harold Baines. Harold Baines, to me, was one of the most underrated baseball players. Um, I saw him when he played for the Baltimore Orioles. He was our designated hitter for many, many years. Was really, to me, he is an underrated baseball player. I really liked his productivity at the plate. He had over 2,800 hits, 1,600 RBI. Um, he was also an outfielder, but like I said, I remember him as a designated hitter when I was a kid watching baseball, and he was with the Baltimore Orioles. Um, 384 home runs, had a 289 career batting average, which is not that bad. 6-time All-Star. I really liked Harold Baines. I thought he was a classy guy, kept himself. Um, like I said, I feel he's totally underrated. He is, to me, he's one of the more underrated baseball players of the last 40 years. Am I saying that he's better than a Derek Jeter or a David Ortiz or, like a Vladimir Guerrero? No, I'm not saying that. But Harold Baines was somebody that I really liked, and he was on the ballot for a while. He was on that ballot for a long time and never got voted in. So um, he gets this opportunity, and I like that he's getting this opportunity. Albert Bell. Albert Bell's an interesting case because with Albert Bell, um, there was a guy who he had, the power. He could hit. He was a good outfielder, but I think what kept him out, at least from the baseball writers' perspective, was his attitude, and he had a nasty attitude. And his career, considering how players are today, 12 years is somewhat not a long time in baseball. When you compare it to Harold Baines, who had 22 years. But Albert's got the statistics here: 5-time All-Star, 5-time Silver Slugger. Um, Played in the World Series. He, you know, his career slugging percentage is 564, which is 13th all time, which is incredible. Um, he, I don't know. I'm a little questionable on him. He got to a World Series. I almost said two World Series, but he wasn't there for the second one when Cleveland was a powerhouse in the 90s. He's an iffy. He's an iffy. I think had he stayed healthy and maybe didn't have much of an attitude, maybe he'd be in. I don't know. Albert Bell's an iffy. Joe Carter. Joe Carter's another one. Um, Five-time All-Star, two-time Silver Slugger, won two World Championships with the Toronto Blue Jays. The only non-America team to win a World Series. I think we all know that by now. He had 396 home runs, so he's almost at 400. 1,400 plus RBI, stole 231 bases. To me, my only concern, and I'm saying this as a fan of baseball, I'm not bashing Joe Carter. The only thing that I remember Joe Carter for is the Game 6 home run that he hit in '93 to help the Blue Jays win the World Series. Because it's like with Bill Mazeroski. The only thing I know about Bill Mazeroski, besides playing for the Pittsburgh Pirates, is the game-winning home run in the seventh game of that World Series back in the 1960s against the New York Yankees. But Joe Carter, another plus, he's got 16 years under his belt. I'm a little iffy on that one. Will Clark, another good player. Two-time Silver Slugger, won a Gold Glove, six-time All-Star, compiled a 303 batting average. That's quite impressive. He was with the Giants most of the time that I remember, and those Giants clubs, with the exception of like towards the end of the 80s and into the early 90s, like the Giants weren't really there for what I remember. And then he went to the Rangers, helped them, went to the Orioles, went to the Cardinals. Basically, what I'm looking at right now, like the first four people at some point all went to play for the Baltimore Orioles. But I think if you were doing college baseball Hall of Fame, I think Will Clark would have been a no-brainer. I don't know. I really don't know. That's another iffy one. Now, Oral Hershiser. Here's a guy who I thought was in the Hall of Fame. I really thought he was in the Hall of Fame. But he's not. Dominating pitcher of his time. Helped the Dodgers win the '88 World Series. Helped them win their last World Championship. Not to rub it into Dodgers fans that are watching this video. He was just a very good pitcher. He was a very good pitcher for his time. And the fact that he isn't in the Hall of Fame is a little bit surprising. And he's the only starting pitcher on this ballot of the Today's Game Era Committee, which I find very, very interesting because there are going to be other pitchers, other starting pitchers down the line that are going to come and they're gonna pop up and you're gonna be, okay, this guy should be in the Hall of Fame. To me, I think Oral has a very good chance to get into the Hall of Fame. I don't know if it's gonna happen, but we'll have to wait and see. The last of the players is Lee Smith. Lee Smith, this is another one that I remember. When I started watching baseball when I was a kid, I remember Lee Smith, pitching for the Baltimore Orioles. He was in the bullpen. If he wasn't, like a middle innings reliever, he was their closer. And Lee Smith is another underrated baseball player, a very underrated pitcher, in my opinion. He was really good, and Before there was Trevor Hoffman, who deserves to be in Cooperstown, and before there was Mariano Rivera, who's definitely going into Cooperstown next year. There's no doubt about it. There was Lee Smith. And I think Lee Smith deserves a chance to get in. He was on that ballot for 15 years before they, made it the 10-year rule. And listen to the clubs he pitched for. He pitched for the Cubs, Red Sox, Cardinals, Yankees, Orioles, Angels, Reds, Expos. So he, while he went to a lot of places, he was still a dominating closing pitcher. When he retired, he had 478 saves. At the time, he was the all-time leader in saves. 7-time All-Star, was in the top 5 of Cy Young voting 3 times, won the Role-Aids Relief Man Award 3 times. I mean, what else is there to say? Lee Smith is an underrated pitcher, very underrated, and he gets overshadowed, I think. But like I said, Trevor Hoffman and Mariano Rivera, they elevated or not elevated. They made closing a game better after Lee Smith, but Lee Smith was sort of the trendsetter at the time, in my opinion, before Hoffman and Rivera came along. Now to the managers. Davey Johnson, one of the best managers I've ever seen. This guy, whenever he got to a club, made that team an instant winner. Started with the Mets, won the World Series in '86. Went to the Reds, very good team. Went to the Orioles, led them to the American League Championship Series 2 years in a row. And I still say in my mind, because Davey Johnson was such a great manager. He was a great manager. I think if everything that happened with him and Peter Angelos, if Angelos had not screwed that up, under Davey Johnson, the Orioles would have won a World Series. They would have won a World Series. And then he was also a manager with the Dodgers and then finally with the Nationals. And he was a part of that, he was the manager when the Nationals really were right at the boom period with Strasburg coming in and Harper coming in. And if it wasn't for Davey, who knows where the Nationals would have been in the last 6, 7, maybe even 8 years, to say the least. He has 1,372 wins. He has a .562 winning percentage, which is 12th all-time among managers. He was actually a baseball player as well, 42 home runs as a second baseman in 1973. But most people remember him best as a manager, and he was the manager of the year twice, in 1997 and 2012. And I think Davey Johnson, to me, gets overlooked a little bit because he did win one World Series, but he had such good talent on all those clubs. It amazes me that he didn't win like a second and a third World Championship. He should have. Charlie Manuel, that's the interesting one to me. That's the interesting one because really, Charlie Manuel, I really didn't know him well until he managed the Phillies. And when he managed the Phillies were the best team in the National League for 5, 6 years. They dominated not only the National League East, but they dominated the National League. Won the World Series in '08, got back to the World Series in '09. Led the Indians to the American League Central in '01. This was after Hargrove was fired a couple seasons before that. He has 1,000 wins. He's the wild card to me. I'm not sure if I would put him in, but the fact that he has 2 World Series appearances and a World Championship in his resume might help him a little bit. And he's got a 548 winning percentage as a manager, which is 16th all time. So he's going to be very interesting. Now, Lou Piniella, my goodness, crazy Lou. Well, he's not crazy, but Lou Piniella. Again, this is another great manager. This is another guy I thought was in the Hall of Fame, but he's not in the Hall of Fame. Managed 23 years, or 23 seasons, I should say, with the Yankees, Reds, Mariners, Rays, and Cubs. Won over 1,800 games, which is 16th all time. Led the Reds to the 1990 World Series. Led the Mariners for a long time, especially that 2001 team that won 116 games. 3-time Manager of the Year. And he was also a former baseball player as well. And he had a couple championships with the Yankees when he was a player. But I remember Lou Piniella as the manager for the Mariners first. That's where I first remember him, especially when you had Ken Griffey Jr., Randy Johnson, Alex Rodriguez, Jay Buhner. That's another name that doesn't get brought up is Jay Buhner. Why isn't he in the discussion for the Hall of Fame? But that's just me. Like I said, I thought he was already in, but he was a very good manager. Very, very good. How he's not in the Hall of Fame, I really don't know. And then the final person, George Steinbrenner. Now I'm just gonna say this off the bat. I despise the New York Yankees. I despise the Yankees. But George Steinbrenner wanted to win. Let's say that right off the bat. That man wanted to win. He knew what he wanted. He was going to get the best players that he possibly could. He had the money to do it. And really, if it wasn't for George Steinbrenner, he, to a degree, made the Yankees relevant again, because before he owned the Yankees, there was that stretch where they sucked. They just flat out sucked. And then he became the owner, and then, they were big again in the 70s, and then there was that time where he was away, and then he came back in the 90s, and my God, the 90s, they were bigger than, before, and George was at the helm of it, and he just knew what he wanted. He wanted to win. And if you've ever seen like any of his documentaries, there's a saying that he had on his desk, and it said, lead, follow, or get the hell out of my way. I like that. That's one of my favorite sayings, I think, of all time, is that. But George knew, as an owner, the best talents to get. He was going to do basically whatever he could to get the best talents, and got them on the field. And, think about it. When he was the owner of the Yankees, they won 11 American League pennants, had a 565 winning percentage, Steinbrenner did. My God, they won like 5 or 6 world championships under his belt. That's quite an accomplishment. Let's not take that away from him. That's quite an accomplishment to have done that. Okay, so now that I've gone through and I've talked about, everyone and my thoughts on, each individual, if I had a vote, who would I give my votes to go into the Hall of Fame in the Today's Game Era Committee? So the first one I'm going to give to is Harold Baines. I loved Harold Baines. I think Harold was like I said earlier, he was an underrated baseball player, very underrated at the plate. He's got the statistics to back him up. He's almost a member of the 3,000 hit club. He's almost at 400 home runs. And I know, like, if you get 3,000 hits, you're guaranteed. And if you have 500 home runs, you're guaranteed. But Harold Baines definitely, to me, deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. He deserves to be in Cooperstown. My next vote would go to Oral Hershiser. He was one of the most dominating pitchers of his time. Um, he was just an amazing talent. 204 wins, regular season wins in his career. 22 postseason games, was 8-3 with a 2.59 ERA. Just very dominating, just a very dominating and in a way an intimidating pitcher, if you think about it. Next vote, I got to give it to Davey Johnson. Davey Johnson would get my next vote. Look at what he did for the majority of the clubs that he managed in 17 seasons. Got them to the playoffs, won division titles. Like I said, led the Mets to a world championship in '86. He's done so much with amazing talent that it's incredible what he did. And like I said, for him not to be in the Hall of Fame is sort of a joke. Then I'd give another vote to Lou Piniella. Why is he not in? Why is he not in the Hall of Fame? This guy should be in the Hall of Fame. 3-time Manager of the Year, won a World Championship as a manager for the Reds. Again, sort of like Davey Johnson. He had some really good players, and he knew how to handle them. Then I'd go with Lee Smith. Like I said, Lee Smith was such a dominating closer and was underrated, I think. I still think he's underrated. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't, the evolution of closers would not, be where it is today with Trevor Hoffman and Mariano Rivera. I mean, he's now third all time on, saves. And 1 and 2 are, number 2 is in the Hall of Fame, Hoffman. Number 1 is going into the Hall of Fame in Rivera next year. And Lee Smith's not in there. I think Lee's got to go in. And then I got to give a vote to George Steinbrenner. I mean, I don't know how often he's going to pop up on this ballot. I know he was on it last year, didn't get in. But you're going to have to put him in sooner or later. And if you don't get him in sooner, I don't know how long it's going to be before he does get in. Because like him or not, he did have an impact on the game of baseball. And he really should be in. He just should. So to recap, the ones that I would give votes to for the Hall of Fame in this committee, today's Game Era committee, would be Harold Baines, Oral Hershiser, Davey Johnson, Lou Piniella, Lee Smith, and George Steinbrenner. So of the 10, who would you vote? Who would you put in your Hall of Fame? Leave a comment below in the comments section. I'll post the link up of the article from the Baseball Hall of Fame website and a little more details on each guy. And we'll see who goes to Cooperstown, if any of them do this year.